A large portion of the Jewish nation has returned to its homeland, but the heart, soul, and mind of much of the Jewish nation are still in exile mode. This state of affairs must and will inevitably change. This is Torah Nation TV from Jerusalem, and we are speaking with the head of Machon Shilo, Rabbi David Bar-Hayim. Shalom, Rabbi Bar-Hayim.
Shalom.
On the eve of Yom HaShoah, Holocaust Commemoration Day, the Deputy Chief of Staff of the IDF, Yair Golan, criticized Israeli society for adopting views which, in his words, are reminiscent of German society in the 1930s. Prime Minister Netanyahu took issue with Golan's statement, adding that it was outrageous. Does the rabbi have any comments?
The first thing to remember in this connection is the fact that this statement of the Deputy Chief of Staff, Yair Golan, comes on the heels of an earlier statement by the Chief of Staff, by the name of Eisenkot, General Eisenkot, about 6 or more weeks ago, in which he said that the Talmudic dictum, Hakam lehorgecha, shkem lehorgo, that if you know that someone is planning to rise up and kill you, then you should rise up earlier and kill him first. He said in this connection that that statement, that dictum, is not or should not be the guiding principle in all situations where a soldier, for example, or a civilian is confronted by a person wielding a knife. He said this in connection to an incident where a teenage Arab girl wielding a knife and about to stab someone with that knife was shot by a soldier, and indirectly the Chief of Staff criticized this soldier for acting in such a manner. Both of these statements are outrageous. No less outrageous is the fact that both of these men, the Chief and the Deputy Chief of Staff of the Israeli Armed Forces, continue to serve in their positions. Of course, what I just said is untrue, because I describe the Israeli army as the Israeli Armed Forces, which is not the official name of the Israeli army. Its official name is the Israeli Defense Forces. And this is exactly part of the problem which we are here to discuss. It is clear that if we were to go back some decades to the 40s, 50s, 60s, and 70s, for example, the kinds of military men who headed the Israeli armed forces, as they should be called, would never have made such statements. In those days, even though the individuals in question were not of a religious persuasion, were not raised in any kind of religious or traditional environment, nevertheless, they had very clear and unequivocal and unapologetic views about how to deal with the enemy and about the correctness and the justice of our cause, and they did not ever suggest that we suffer from some kind of ideological aberration because we dislike our enemies and because we wish to be victorious over our enemies. However, the present generation of generals in Israel, by and large, are so far removed from any kind of authentic Jewish and even secular Zionist philosophy. They are so heavily influenced by radical left-wing thinking and by Christian ideologies and conceptions that defeating the enemy, fighting the enemy, and killing the enemy are, in fact, to these people, a kind of anathema, and therefore they are constantly working on the basis of a split personality and a kind of cognitive dissonance within themselves. On the one hand, killing is wrong, and on the other hand, they are in the business of killing. That is the purpose of an army. Let us remind ourselves the purpose of an army is to kill and destroy the enemy and to remove, if necessary, by killing the persons or group or nation in question, by removing the threat that they pose. In the Ten Commandments, it says, Lo tirtzah, thou shalt not murder. That is how it should be translated. But if one looks in the King James Version of the Bible, the most classic and most authoritative, generally considered the most authoritative English translation of the Bible, which is of course a Christian-influenced work, one discovers that the translation of Lo Tirtzah is not "thou shalt not murder," but rather "thou shalt not kill." And that is because, in a very deep and profound way, in the eyes of Christianity, killing is always a bad thing, no matter what the circumstances, no matter what the reason, what the justification. Killing, by definition, is a bad thing. And therefore, "thou shalt not kill" becomes the incorrect translation of that particular statement of the Torah. And this is exactly what motivates the anti-Israel and extreme left in Western Europe and here in Israel as well. Killing and violence, by definition, are always seen as evil, and this is a purely Christian ideology, but it must be understood. This has nothing to do with a true Jewish ideology. This has nothing to do with the message that one receives when one reads the Hebrew Bible, and not a mistaken and misguided translation thereof. Let me be clear. According to the Torah, according to a Jewish moral philosophy, murder is always a terrible thing. Murder is a terrible crime. Bloodshed or killing, on the other hand, is not always a crime. In fact, sometimes it is a mitzvah. Sometimes it is a commandment of the Torah to kill certain types or classes of people, and sometimes the killing of certain individuals or groups of people is a very positive action. The Torah does not educate us to understand, to believe that killing is always a bad thing, to remove evil from the world, to prevent evil from being perpetrated in the world, to protect the innocent and the merciful and the law-abiding from those who are the opposite of those characteristics. That is not an evil action. That is, in fact, a very positive action. And we all know that many of our greatest heroes, starting with Avraham Avinu, who went off and fought a war in which, without a doubt, many people were killed, via Moshe Rabbeinu, who killed the Egyptian when he saw the Egyptian mercilessly beating one of his Hebrew brothers, and via David HaMelech, whose career was based on fighting the Jewish people's enemies, and down to the present day, many of the Jewish people's greatest heroes and many of our forefathers and famous individuals in our history have been people who killed our enemy, and who did, by so doing, brought great benefit and good to the world. People like Judah Maccabeus, who was famous for killing and intimidating the enemies of the Jewish people here in Eretz Israel, and their sympathizers within the Jewish people, who were complicit in the plan of the Greco-Syrians to destroy the Jewish people as a nation, and to destroy their spiritual heritage. This was brought about by tremendous amounts of bloodshed, and that is why we are here and able to discuss this today. Because killing is not always a bad thing. Sometimes it is a very good and very positive thing. This is the true Jewish conception of morality, but this is not, I admit, the Christian understanding of what is moral and what is not moral. And therefore, when you have generals who are so heavily influenced by their university studies, by the books and the newspapers that they read, by their contacts with foreign governments, foreign agents, and their opposite numbers in different countries, who are coming from a totally perverse and Christian perspective, they are influenced by such thoughts, by such ideas, and therefore they no longer really have any clear understanding in their own mind. They lack moral clarity with regards to their purpose and what is correct and what is proper to do with regards to those who wish to do evil and bring destruction to the Jewish people, to their own nation. And therefore we hear such idiotic statements from these individuals, and this is of course something to be lamented. With regards to Prime Minister Netanyahu, it is true that I was pleasantly surprised to hear that he condemned the statement of Yair Golan. On the other hand, one must point out, that Netanyahu himself is responsible for the fact that both General Eisenkot is Chief of Staff and that his deputy is Yair Golan. These are decisions that he made or that he endorsed. He could have and should have chosen different people for these positions, just as he should have chosen different people to fill the posts of Attorney General and many other posts, important posts and positions in the country. Netanyahu likes to talk the talk, but he does not walk the walk. He time and again allows or even promotes the kind of people who advocate the kinds of philosophies and ideas that in theory he claims not to be in agreement with, but in practice he promotes these people and allows them to have an undue influence over the affairs of the state and over the Israeli society. On the other hand, one could point out that there is also a silver lining to this cloud, and that is the fact that recently a poll was published in which it was revealed that approximately half of those amongst Israeli Jews who consider themselves to be leftists admit to feeling uncomfortable about airing their leftist views in many public situations, with people with whom they are not comfortable, with people they do not know. In other words, with strangers or with people they have not come into contact with before, because they feel that Israeli society is not at all sympathetic to their position. On the other hand, 90% of those Israeli Jews who describe themselves as being of a right-wing inclination expressed their feeling that they were quite comfortable and relaxed about expressing their views openly. This is an indication of the fact that Israeli society, by and large, is becoming more healthy and is more able to understand the truth and the depth of the issues before us, and that the Israeli public is capable of achieving this moral clarity, whereas many of the political and military chiefs are not in step at all with this positive development in Israeli society. One last point I wish to make is that in response to these kinds of statements by the Chief of Staff and his deputy, one would expect that the national religious right wing would be very vocal in condemning these statements, and yet we hear very, very few statements from the national religious camp. And this, in my view, is indicative of a very serious problem that the national religious camp suffers from, and that is the mistaken belief, which is almost akin to a kind of fascism, that high officials, people in positions of power in the military and the political echelons, cannot and should not be criticized because they somehow represent the nation, or they are somehow above criticism. This, of course, is not true. Nothing could be further from the truth. The fact that a person is a general does not necessarily even imply that he is very intelligent, let alone imply that he is always correct in his views or in his ideologies. The national religious world has to learn how to explain and fully reveal the problems in the ideologies and the views of these types of individuals in Israeli society, and to condemn them roundly, and not feel that by so doing they are somehow not being Zionist in their behavior. This is not true. Not supporting the statements of individuals or expressing criticism of an elected official or an appointed official or a military official has nothing to do with being Zionist or not. And this is something the national religious world is yet to understand and fully internalize.
Thank you, Rabbi Bar-Hayim. We would like to encourage our viewers to share these videos with friends and send in your responses. We would also like to suggest the following opportunity to our viewers. If you identify with Rabbi Bar-Hayim's message and would like to sponsor or dedicate a video interview with the rabbi in honor or memory of a loved one, If you would like to obtain Birkon Nusach Eretz Yisrael or invite the rabbi for a speaking engagement, please email us at office@machonshilo.org.